J-Bone here, and I've got everything you need to know before you watch the 2023 Australian Grand Prix. J-Bone! And by the way, I am joined today by producer Jeff, who is on the new Formula Bone pit wall. You know how Haas revolutionized the pit wall game this season by theirs having only 3 seats? Well, the Formula Bone pit wall only features 1 seat. Producer Jeff, radio check.
Yep, loud and clear, J-Bone. I'm here at the Formula Bone pit wall. It's brand new. We only have 1 seat. It's all we can afford right now. The other teams have a lot more usually. But can I sit in the 1 seat, actually? That'd be comfortable.
No, you can't. I'm actually reserving that for me, so yeah.
Okay, well, yep, I'll stand up. All good, all good.
First up, the logistics. Because the Australian Grand Prix takes place on the other side of the globe in Melbourne, Australia, it has some funky logistics if you live in the United States or share time zones with the US, as 3 of the Australian Grand Prix's 5 sessions, FP2, qualifying, and the Grand Prix, take place at midnight Central Time. This actually makes the Australian Grand Prix a 4-day race weekend for most of the United States, as FP1 takes place late Thursday night and the Grand Prix takes place early Sunday morning. It's like the Labor Day weekend of race weekends, which is fitting because McLaren have a lot of labor to do so as to not brutally embarrass Oscar Piastri at his first ever home Grand Prix. The 2023 Australian Grand Prix is taking place at the Albert Park Circuit in Melbourne, Australia, which is located near the southeastern tip of the Australian continent. Fun fact, Australia is the only country on Earth that covers an entire continent, and because it's a continent, Australia is technically not an island because, by definition, a continent cannot also be an island. This year's event will be the 37th running of the Australian Grand Prix, which has run uninterrupted since 1985, aside from in 2020 and 2021 when it was canceled due to global health concerns. The first 11 Australian Grand Prix took place in Adelaide, Australia on the Adelaide Street Circuit from 1985 through 1995, after which the race was moved 450 miles or 725 kilometers to Melbourne, Australia and the Albert Park Circuit, where it has remained ever since. The Australian Grand Prix's Albert Park Circuit is located in Melbourne's Albert Park, obviously, and encircles Albert Park Lake. It is one of just 2 F1 street circuits located in a public park, with the other being the Canadian Grand Prix's Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. And interestingly, water is involved in both these circuit designs. While the Albert Park Circuit surrounds a body of water, Circuit Gilles Villeneuve both surrounds and is surrounded by a body of water. Now that is the kind of hard-hitting F1 circuit analysis that you just won't find anywhere else. J-Bone! Next up, I don't trust the Australian Grand Prix. Last season, they told all of us that they'd be making history by becoming the first Grand Prix to ever feature 4 DRS zones, and, like suckers, we all believed them. And then, boom, between FP2 and FP3, with 2 sessions already in the books, they went and removed one of the DRS zones, citing safety concerns. And driver safety is of the utmost importance, so that was, of course, totally fine, until they announced before this season that they would be adding that DRS zone back in for the 2023 Australian Grand Prix. Now, I get that the porpoising problem has been more or less fixed now, and I'm sure that that played a role in their decisions to both take the 4th zone away last year and add it back in this year, but a little transparency would be nice. Like, which one is it? Is it safe or is it not safe? Are they actually going to have 4 DRS zones this time or not? I don't know. Now you understand why I don't trust the Australian Grand Prix, and you shouldn't either.
J-Bone, I completely agree. I do not trust the Australian Grand Prix either, and it's because there's too big of a risk of a kangaroo coming on the track.
Now, assuming the Australian Grand Prix's organizers are telling us the truth about them running 4 DRS zones in this weekend's race for the first time in F1 history, something interesting to note is that these 4 DRS zones only feature 2 DRS detection lines. DRS detection line 1 is between turns 6 and 7 and services the two DRS zones in the back part of the circuit, and DRS detection line 2 is between turns 12 and 13 and services the two DRS zones in the front part of the circuit. Having one DRS detection line service two DRS zones means that drivers who complete overtakes in the first of the two DRS zones will then still be able to utilize DRS in the second DRS zone even after they've already passed the driver who gave them DRS, allowing them to get even further ahead of that driver. This race will not only be the first Grand Prix to ever feature 4 DRS zones, but also the first Grand Prix to ever feature 2 divided DRS zones. So let's see how this one plays out, folks. I think it should cause an increase in overtakes, which who doesn't like that? Speaking of overtake increases, the Australian Grand Prix circuit was significantly renovated ahead of last year's race, and those changes accomplished their goal of making the race more exciting. Last year's Australian Grand Prix featured 34 overtakes, which was more than the previous 2 Australian Grand Prix combined. And now, with the addition of a 4th DRS zone, we should see even more overtakes this weekend, and I cannot wait. Next up, here are your storylines to follow for the 2023 Australian Grand Prix. Your first storyline: I think Aston Martin are about to have the greatest single race comeback of all time. You may not remember Aston Martin's performance at last year's Australian Grand Prix because it was certainly one to forget. Sebastian Vettel had a power failure in FP1, a crash in FP3, and a crash during the race. And Lance Stroll was involved in 2 crashes on his way to finishing outside the points. Even the Aston Martin safety car got caught up in this mess, with Max Verstappen calling it a turtle after the race because it is green and was moving too slow for him to keep his tire temperatures up. But that, folks, was last year's Aston Martin. This year's Aston Martin is fast and scary and looks primed to complete one of, if not the greatest, single race comebacks in F1 history by waltzing into Australia, the site of so much shame last year, and scoring a solid chunk of points, probably a podium, and maybe even a race win? Oh my gosh. Yeah, I have Aston Martin delusion syndrome, don't I?
Box for ad read, J-Bone. Box for ad read.
Let me quickly tell you about my sponsor, Athletic Greens. AG1 by Athletic Greens is all of your key health products in one and features 75 high-quality ingredients that give you key daily nutrients and long-term gut health support. I gave AG1 a try because I hated having to remember taking different pills and vitamins and instead wanted a comprehensive solution to cover all my nutritional bases for the day at once. And I love AG1 because it isn't just that comprehensive solution, it also tastes great. I take AG1 in the morning before doing anything else because I love feeling like I'm covering my nutritional bases for the whole day within the first 15 minutes of waking up. And it literally could not be an easier habit to start. You just mix 1 small scoop of AG1 with water and drink it first thing each morning. Boom, you're done. And you don't have to drink it first thing in the morning if you don't want to. It's also a great pre- and post-workout drink. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then Athletic Greens is giving you a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Go to athleticgreens.com/fbone. That's athleticgreens.com/fbone. Link is in the description. Check it out. Your second storyline: how will Carlos Sainz perform at the Australian Grand Prix? After starting last year's F1 season with back-to-back podiums, Carlos Sainz then got the yips at the Australian Grand Prix after beaching it in the gravel and DNFing. These yips carried over to the following race at Imola, with Sainz DNFing again there after beaching it again there, following a collision with Daniel Ricciardo. You have to think that memories of last year's disappointing race and its after effects will be fresh on Carlos Sainz's mind this weekend. Now, Fortunately for Sainz, there's way less pressure on him this season compared to last season, considering he and Ferrari are yet to podium this season. So Sainz's performance will definitely be one to watch this weekend. Your third storyline, how will McLaren rookie Oscar Piastri perform at his first ever home Grand Prix in Australia? An Australian driver has been on the Formula One grid every season since 2002, and with Oscar Piastri just joining the grid and another Aussie, Alpine reserve driver Jack Doohan, waiting in the wings, it looks like that trend will continue for quite some time. But how will Piastri's debut F1 performance in his home country go? Well, based on McLaren's form right now, not well. McLaren are currently tied for last place in the World Constructors' Championship, with neither Oscar Piastri nor his teammate Lando Norris scoring a point yet this season. However, it is worth noting that the previous two Australian drivers, Mark Webber and Daniel Ricciardo, both scored points at their first home Grand Prix in Australia, so maybe there is just something about those Aussie fans that will help propel Oscar Piastri into the points this weekend. Speaking of Daniel Ricciardo, your final storyline, there is a conspiracy theory going around about Daniel Ricciardo. This theory states that Red Bull only brought Daniel Ricciardo on as their third driver this season as a warning to Checo that if he starts going rogue and challenging Red Bull's golden boy Max Verstappen for the World Drivers' Championship, they will replace him with Daniel Ricciardo mid-season. Producer Jeff, any thoughts on that?
J-Bone, whoever told you that really sounds like they know what they're talking about.
As evidence for this, the conspiracy theorists are citing a now deleted tweet from Checo posted after his victory in Saudi Arabia that stated in Spanish, quote, "It was tougher than I thought, but in the end, I'm happy to get my 5th victory in F1. Very happy with the result of the team. We are going to keep pushing very hard. I want to be champion." End quote. This tweet was deleted not long after it was posted and replaced with the exact same tweet, but with the line, "I want to be champion," removed. This begs the question, just how far are Red Bull willing to go to keep Checo from fighting Max for the World Drivers' Championship? Now, I'm not saying that I personally adhere to this conspiracy theory, but I just wanted to put it out there into the world in the name of transparency. Now, the moment you've all been waiting for, here are my 3 bona fide race predictions for the 2023 Australian Grand Prix. I went 3 for 3 with my Saudi Arabian Grand Prix race predictions and am 5 for 6 so far on the season, so these predictions are almost guaranteed to come true. My first race prediction is that Fernando Alonso will finish on the podium at the Australian Grand Prix. Alonso and Aston Martin's race pace is just too good right now compared to Mercedes and Ferraris for me to bet against him making it 3 podiums in a row to start the season. My second race prediction is that Alex Albon will finish in the points at the Australian Grand Prix. Alex Albon put together one of the performances of the season at Albert Park last year when he completed one of the longest tire stints in F1 history, 57 laps on the hard tires that he started the race on his way to finishing in the points at P10. I like him to channel some more Albert Park magic and finish in the points again this year. My third race prediction is that Lewis Hamilton will finish P5 for the 3rd race in a row. And I'm not saying in the top 5, I'm saying exactly P5, the same spot in which he has finished the previous 2 races. I don't really have a ton of evidence or reasoning here. I'm just a sucker for patterns. Producer Jeff, do you have any thoughts on that?
My pit wall prediction is that McLaren will have the fastest pit stop of the day.
Subscribe now so that I can see you back here after the Australian Grand Prix for my Australian Grand Prix recap, where we will all digest the insanity that occurs at this race weekend together. By the way, if you're a fan of HBO's hit TV show Succession that just returned for its final season, then you need to check out Oysters, Clams, and Cockles' Succession, which is an amazing podcast that is recapping and discussing every single episode of Succession in hilarious and insightful fashion. I can't recommend Oysters, Clams, and Cockles enough if you're an HBO fan. They're one of the biggest TV and film podcasts in the world for a reason. I've placed a link to their YouTube channel in the description, and their podcast is also available wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you enjoyed this content and want more right now and all F1 season long, just $5 a month on patreon.com/formulabone gets you 2 additional Patreon exclusive videos per month, access to my weekly written F1 column where I put my most wild and unfiltered takes, and more. And most importantly, your support on Patreon helps make it so that I can keep making Formula One content full time. So go check out patreon.com/formulabone now for even more F1 content. Special shout out to my top Patreon supporters, Colkey, @RatedBookie, and Glow. Until next time, folks, J-Bound! J-Bound!